Three identical triplets ask a millionaire for food and their necklace leaves him stunned. Thunder rattled the windows of Anderson Manor, its limestone walls standing defiant against the raging storm. Inside, Richard Anderson sat in his leather armchair, a crystal tumbler of whiskey trembling slightly in his weathered hand. At 60, he had grown accustomed to loneliness, letting it settle around him like the darkness that pressed against the mansion's rain-streaked windows. The grandfather clock in the hall struck 9, its deep resonance barely audible over howling wind. Richard closed his eyes, allowing memories to wash over him like waves memories he'd spent 3 decades trying to forget. Then, cutting through the storm's fury, came a sound that didn't belong, 3 soft knocks at the heavy oak door. Richard frowned, placing his whiskey on the side table. Who would venture out on such a treacherous night? The knocking came again, more urgent this time. "Coming," he called, his voice rough from disuse. The door creaked open to reveal 3 small figures huddled together on his doorstep. Lightning flashed, illuminating identical faces, 3 little girls, no more than 7 years old, drenched to the bone. Their dark hair clung to pale cheeks, and their simple clothes were soaked through. "Please, sir," one of them spoke, her voice barely audible above the storm. "Could you spare some food? We're very hungry." Richard stood frozen, shocked by the scene before him. 3 children, alone in such weather? Come in," he managed, ushering them inside. They hesitated before stepping into the warmth of the hall, leaving small puddles on the marble floor. As he fetched towels from the linen closet, something caught his eye, a glint of gold around one girl's neck. His heart stopped. Hanging from a delicate chain was a heart-shaped locket, its surface etched with tiny flowers. He knew that locket. He had given it to Emily Thompson 30 years ago, the night before everything fell apart. "Where did you get that locket?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. The girls exchanged glances before the one wearing it spoke. "It was our grandmother's. Mom gave it to us after Grandma Emily died." Richard felt the floor sway beneath his feet. Grandmother? Mother? The carefully constructed walls of his solitary existence began to crumble. These children standing before him, with their innocent eyes and Emily's locket, who were they really? And what did their appearance mean for the carefully guarded secrets of Anderson Manor? Richard Anderson's life was a testament to both success and solitude. At 60, he cut an imposing figure, despite his age, tall and distinguished, with silver hair that remained thick despite the years, and steel blue eyes that held the weight of untold stories. The master of Anderson Manor, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Burlington, Vermont, had built his fortune in real estate development, turning his family's modest holdings into an empire that stretched across New England. Yet wealth had done little to fill the emptiness that echoed through the manor's halls. Each morning Richard would wake in his master's suite, surrounded by antique furniture and fine art, only to face another day of memories and regrets. His daily routine was a carefully orchestrated dance of solitude breakfast served by his housekeeper, Mrs. Sullivan, the only staff member he'd retained over the years, followed by hours in his study managing his businesses through phone calls and emails. The study, a sanctuary of mahogany and leather, held more than just business documents. In the bottom drawer of his desk, locked away from prying eyes, lay a cedar box containing the fragments of a life he'd abandoned 3 decades ago: letters, photographs and newspaper clippings, all centered around one woman, Emily Thompson. Richard's family history was steeped in old money and older prejudices. The Andersons had been among Burlington's founding families, their name carved into the cornerstones of hospitals and university buildings. His father, Jonathan Anderson, had ruled the family with an iron fist, demanding nothing less than perfect adherence to social expectations. Richard's mother, Elizabeth, had been a silent presence, her own dreams long sacrificed on the altar of social propriety. The weight of family legacy had shaped Richard's early years. As the eldest son, he was groomed from childhood to take over the family business. His younger brother David, always in his shadow, developed a sharp edge to his ambition that would later prove destructive. Private schools, Ivy League education, carefully selected social circles, every aspect of Richard's life was orchestrated to maintain the Anderson family's position in society. But beneath the polished exterior, Richard harbored deep wounds. The decision to abandon Emily Thompson 30 years ago, bowing to family pressure and social expectations, had left a scar that never truly healed. He'd thrown himself into work, building his business empire as a way to escape the guilt and regret that haunted him. The mansion, with its sweeping lawns and marble floors, had become both his fortress and his prison. Years of therapy had done little to ease his conscience. Richard had never married, never had children, or so he'd thought. Each Christmas and Thanksgiving, he would sit alone at the massive dining table, surrounded by empty chairs and echoing silence. The holidays were the hardest, when the weight of his choices pressed most heavily upon him. His relationship with his brother David had grown increasingly strained over the years. While Richard retreated into solitude, David had braced the social circuit, becoming a prominent figure in local politics and business. Yet there was always an undercurrent of tension between them, a sense of competition that had never quite faded from their childhood years. The arrival of 3 young girls on his doorstep, bearing Emily's locket, threatened to unravel everything Richard had built to protect himself from the past. As he stood in his study that stormy night, watching the rain lash against the windows, he could feel the foundations of his carefully constructed world beginning to shake. Emily Thompson had been a beacon of light in Burlington's working-class community, her story woven into the fabric of the city's less privileged side. Born to a schoolteacher and a factory worker, she grew up in a modest 2-story house on Cedar Street, where flower boxes brightened every window despite the neighborhood's declining fortunes. Her inherent grace and intelligence set her apart from an early age, earning her a scholarship to the local university where fate would lead her to cross paths with Richard Anderson. The Emily that Richard had known was a vision of quiet beauty, chestnut hair that caught the sunlight, warm brown eyes that sparkled with intelligence, and a smile that could illuminate the darkest room. She worked at the university library to support her studies in literature, her fingers perpetually stained with ink from the books she loved. It was there, among the towering shelves of leather-bound volumes, that she first encountered Richard, their love story beginning amid whispered conversations about Wordsworth and Keats. But Emily was more than just the subject of a tragic romance. Those who knew her spoke of her resilience, her unwavering determination to help others despite her own circumstances. Even after her disappearance from Burlington's social scene, she continued to touch lives in the working-class neighborhood where she raised her daughter alone. She taught evening literacy classes at the community center, helped organize food drives for struggling families, and never turned away anyone in need of help. The truth about Emily's final years emerged gradually after her death, pieced together through conversations with neighbors and entries in her private journals. The cancer diagnosis had come as a cruel surprise, but she faced it with characteristic grace, never letting her daughter Sarah see her fear. She worked multiple jobs until she physically couldn't anymore, determined to leave Sarah with enough resources to care for her 3 daughters. Emily's diary, discovered years later, revealed the depths of her sacrifice and pain. The entries spoke of her enduring love for Richard, her heartbreak at their separation, and the crushing weight of the threats made against her by the Anderson family. She had kept Richard's locket all those years, a tangible reminder of their love, even as she built a new life away from the society that had rejected her. Her small house on Maple Street became a haven for others facing hardship. Despite her own struggles, she always found ways to help watching neighbors' children while they worked extra shifts, organizing clothing swaps for growing families, offering comfort and advice to other single mothers. The community remembered her as their unofficial guardian angel, someone who understood that true wealth lay in acts of kindness, rather than bank accounts. The discovery of her suicide note changed everything. What appeared to be a natural death from cancer was revealed to be a final act of desperation and love. Terminal illness had left her with mounting medical bills and the fear of becoming a burden to Sarah. The note, hidden in a hollow book in her bedroom, detailed not only her reasons but also the truth about the past, the threats, the manipulation, and the stolen inheritance that should have secured her daughter's future. Emily's legacy lived on in the memories of those she touched. The community center where she volunteered named their literacy program after her. The flower boxes she loved still brightened windows throughout the neighborhood, maintained by neighbors who remembered her passion for bringing beauty to overlooked places. But perhaps her most lasting impact was on her daughter Sarah and granddaughters, 3 little girls who inherited not only her locket but also her spirit of resilience and capacity for love. The revelation of Emily's true fate would eventually shake Burlington's social foundations, exposing decades of prejudice and manipulation. Her story became a catalyst for change, forcing the city's elite to confront their role in perpetuating cycles of poverty and discrimination. In death, as in life, Emily Thompson continued to challenge the barriers that had defined her existence. Sarah Thompson embodied her mother's strength and grace, though life had carved deeper lines of hardship into her young face. At 32, she carried herself with a quiet dignity that belied her circumstances. Her dark hair, often pulled back in a practical bun, framed features that echoed Emily's beauty, while her eyes held the same determined spark that had characterized her mother's gaze. As a single mother to identical triplets, she navigated poverty with remarkable resilience, working multiple jobs to keep her small family afloat. Lucy, Grace, and Hope, the 7-year-old triplets, were mirror images of each other, with their grandmother's delicate features and their mother's unwavering spirit. Lucy, the eldest by minutes, was the natural leader, often speaking for her sisters. Grace possessed a gentle soul and artistic talent, filling their modest home with drawings. Hope, the quietest, observed the world with wisdom beyond her years, often noticing things others missed. And their home on Maple Street, though small and worn, reflected Sarah's determination to provide stability for her daughters. The peeling paint and patched windows couldn't diminish the warmth within. Every available surface displayed the girls' artwork, and carefully tended flowers bloomed in recycled containers, a tribute to Emily's love of growing beautiful things in unlikely places. Sarah's life was a constant balancing act. She had lost her job at the local factory when it closed, forcing her to piece together income from various sources, cleaning houses, taking in mending, tutoring neighborhood children in the evenings. Despite never having the chance to finish college, she was determined her daughters would have the education she couldn't complete. Each night, after the girls were asleep, she studied online courses, dreaming of completing her business degree. The community rallied around them in small but significant ways. Mrs. Rodriguez from the corner store often slipped extra fruit into their grocery bags. Mr. Johnson, the baker, saved day-old bread for them. The neighborhood watched out for the triplets when Sarah worked, creating an informal support system that helped the family survive their hardest times. The girls attended the community center's free programs, where their grandmother had once taught. They shared everything: clothes, toys, dreams, and showed remarkable maturity in understanding their family's limitations. They never complained about wearing hand-me-downs or having simple meals. Instead, they found joy in small pleasures: playing in the park, reading books from the library, singing songs their grandmother had taught their mother. The locket that once belonged to Emily had become their most treasured possession. They took turns wearing it, treating it with reverence that showed they understood its significance to their mother. Sarah would often find them huddled together, looking at the tiny photograph inside, asking questions about the grandmother they never knew. Recent months had been particularly challenging. The loss of Sarah's factory job had forced them to move to a smaller apartment. Bills mounted, and despite Sarah's best efforts, there were nights when dinner was scarce. The girls tried to help in their own ways, drawing pictures to cheer their mother up, offering to skip meals when food was low, sharing their single bed to save space. Yet Sarah refused to be defeated. She had inherited Emily's strength and determination, channeling it into protecting her daughters from the worst of their poverty. She taught them to find beauty in simple things, to value education, and to hold on to hope even in their darkest moments. The triplets grew up understanding that while they might lack material wealth, they were rich in love and family bonds. They were their grandmother's legacy, three perfect echoes of Emily's grace, carrying forward her spirit of resilience and capacity for joy despite adversity. In them, Sarah saw the possibility of breaking the cycle of hardship that had defined their family's story. She was determined they would have opportunities she never had, even if it meant working herself to exhaustion. The night they ventured out in the storm to seek help was born of desperation, a mother's last resort when all other options had failed. Sarah never imagined that this act of necessity would lead them to Anderson Manor, or that their grandmother's locket would unlock doors long closed by pride and prejudice. The chain of events that would unravel decades of secrets began on a rain-soaked Thursday evening in late October. Sarah Thompson had been out since dawn, searching for work in Burlington's increasingly hostile job market. The factory closure had left hundreds unemployed, and her lack of formal qualifications meant each rejection cut deeper than the last. The triplets had stayed with Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor who watched them when Sarah couldn't afford to miss a potential job opportunity. That evening, Sarah returned home empty-handed to find a notice taped to their apartment door: final warning for overdue rent. Inside, the electricity had been cut off, leaving the small space dark and cold. The kitchen cupboards held only a single can of soup and half a loaf of stale bread. She had stretched their resources as far as possible, but now faced the unthinkable: her children might go to bed hungry. Lucy, Grace, and Hope sat huddled together on their shared bed, wearing layers of clothing to keep warm. They had spent the afternoon drawing pictures by candlelight, trying to maintain normalcy in a situation that was anything but normal. The sight of their brave smiles broke Sarah's heart. "Mum, we're okay," Lucy said, always the first to sense her mother's distress. "We can share the soup." "And we're not even that hungry," Grace added, though her stomach growled in protest. Hope remained silent, fingering Emily's locket that hung around her neck that day. The precious heirloom caught the dim light from the street lamp outside, its golden surface seeming to glow with an inner warmth. Sarah gathered her daughters close, fighting back tears. "I'm so sorry, my darlings. Things will get better soon, I promise." But for the first time, her voice lacked conviction. The weight of repeated failures and mounting bills had worn down her usually unshakable optimism. As the evening wore on, and the temperature dropped further, Sarah made a desperate decision. She had heard rumors of a wealthy neighborhood on the outskirts of town where some families were known to help those in need. It was a long shot, and her pride rebelled against the idea of begging, but her children's hunger left her no choice. "Girls," she said, gathering them around, "I need to go out one more time to look for work. Stay with Mrs. Rodriguez until I return." But the triplets, perceiving their mother's desperation, had other ideas. While Sarah prepared to leave, they held a whispered conference of their own. They had inherited their mother's determination and their grandmother's spirit. They would find a way to help. As Sarah stepped into the hallway, the girls quickly grabbed their threadbare coats and Emily's locket, which they viewed as a talisman of protection. They slipped out after their mother but took a different route, heading toward the wealthy neighborhood they had only seen from a distance. The storm hit suddenly, transforming their journey into an ordeal. Rain soaked through their inadequate clothing, and thunder crashed overhead. Yet they pressed on, drawing strength from each other and the familiar weight of their grandmother's locket. Anderson Manor loomed before them, its lights a beacon in the darkness. The girls stood at the gates, drenched and shivering, but determined. They had heard stories of the mansion's owner. Some said he was kind, but lonely. Others claimed he was bitter and reclusive. In their innocence, they chose to believe the former. The long walk up the driveway seemed endless. By the time they reached the massive front door, they were exhausted and frightened, but the warmth radiating from inside gave them courage. Lucy, still wearing the locket, reached up and knocked. None of them could have known that this desperate act would set in motion events that would transform not only their lives but the lives of everyone connected to Anderson Manor. The locket, carried through years of hardship, was about to fulfill its destiny as a key to unlocking long-buried truths. The moment Richard Anderson opened his door to find 3 identical faces staring up at him, something shifted in the universe. The storm outside seemed to pause, holding its breath as past and present collided in that marble-floored entryway. But his initial shock at finding children on his doorstep transformed into something deeper, more visceral, as his eyes caught the glint of gold at Lucy's throat. The locket, Emily's locket, hung there like a beacon from the past. Richard's hands began to tremble as memories flooded back the small jewelry shop where he'd bought it 30 years ago, the way Emily's eyes had lit up when he fastened it around her neck, the tiny inscription he'd had engraved inside, "Forever my love, R.A." "Please," Sir Lucy spoke, her voice trembling from cold and fear. "We haven't eaten since yesterday morning. Could you help us?" But Richard barely heard her words. He was transfixed by the locket, its familiar heart shape and delicate floral engravings unchanged by time. His mind raced through possibilities. It couldn't be the same one. Surely there must be others like it. Yet deep down, he knew. This was the exact piece he'd given Emily on their last night together. As he ushered the girls inside, his movements mechanical and distant, Richard's trained eye caught other details that sent shockwaves through his system. The shape of their eyes, the curve of their cheeks, the way the middle one, Grace, tilted her head slightly when curious, all pure Emily. These children weren't just random strangers seeking help, they were pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known existed. That locket, he finally managed, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Where did you get it?" The girls exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them that spoke of shared secrets and protective instincts. Hope, the quietest, finally answered, "It was our grandmother's. Mom says it's our most special treasure." "Your grandmother," Richard's voice cracked on the word. What was her name?" "Emily Thompson," Lucy replied proudly. "Mom says she was the kindest, bravest person in the world, but she died before we were born." Richard staggered slightly, gripping the nearby table for support. "Emily dead?" The room seemed to spin around him as decades of guilt and regret crashed over him like a tidal wave. He had always imagined her out there somewhere, living a full life, perhaps happy with someone else. The reality that she was gone, that he'd never have the chance to make things right, hit him with physical force. But these girls, her granddaughters, represented something he'd never imagined. He had a child. Somewhere out there was his daughter, Emily's daughter, these children's mother. The mathematics of time aligned perfectly with Emily's disappearance 30 years ago. At that moment, Mrs. Sullivan, his housekeeper, appeared in the hallway. Taking in the scene, 3 dripping children, and her employer's pale face, she immediately took charge. "Let's get you girls warm and fed," she said kindly, leading them toward the kitchen. Left alone in the entrance hall, Richard sank onto a bench, his legs no longer able to support him. The storm outside seemed to mirror the turbulence in his soul, 3 decades of carefully constructed walls crumbling in the face of undeniable evidence. He reached into his pocket for his phone, then stopped. Who would he call? What would he say? From the kitchen came the sounds of young voices and the clatter of plates, normal, domestic sounds that had never echoed through Anderson Manor's halls. Richard closed his eyes, remembering similar sounds from his childhood, before wealth and social expectations had twisted his family's values. The girls' presence in his house couldn't be coincidence. On this stormy night, fate had delivered them to his doorstep, wearing Emily's locket like a key to unlock the past. But as the initial shock began to fade, new questions arose. Where was their mother? Why were they out alone in such weather? What circumstances had driven them to seek help from strangers? David Anderson's sleek black Mercedes pulled up to Anderson Manor just as the storm reached its peak. At 57, he cut a distinguished figure shorter than his brother but meticulously groomed, with carefully dyed hair and an expensive suit that spoke of his position as a prominent city councilman. He hadn't planned to visit Richard that night, but the urgent call from Mrs. Sullivan's nephew, who worked as his assistant, had drawn him like a moth to flame. Through the rain-streaked windows of his car, he noticed unfamiliar movement in the manor's normally silent halls. The light from the kitchen, usually dark at this hour, spilled onto the driveway. Something had changed in his brother's carefully ordered world, and David had always made it his business to know everything that happened in the Anderson family. Entering through the side door with his own key, David heard children's voices and alien sound in these halls. He moved silently through the house, years of practice making his footsteps soundless on the marble floors. As he approached the kitchen, he caught sight of them, 3 identical little girls, wrapped in oversized towels, eating soup at his brother's antique mahogany table. But it was the glint of gold around one child's neck that stopped him cold. David recognized that locket instantly. He'd spent years ensuring its existence remained hidden, along with all other traces of Emily Thompson. His carefully orchestrated plans, decades of manipulation, threatened to unravel with this single piece of jewelry. Memories flooded back the night he'd confronted Emily, threatening to destroy her reputation and career if she didn't leave Burlington. The satisfaction he'd felt watching her board a bus out of town, believing he'd protected the Anderson family name from scandal. The years spent intercepting her letters to Richard, ensuring his brother remained ignorant of his child's existence. David retreated into the shadows of the hallway, his mind racing. These children, they had to be Emily's granddaughters, which meant somewhere nearby was the daughter he'd helped erase from history. The daughter who, according to the terms of their father's real will, stood to inherit half of the Anderson fortune. Through the kitchen door, he could hear Richard's voice, softer than he'd heard it in years. His brother was asking the children about their mother, about their lives. Each answer they gave threatened to expose David's carefully constructed web of lies. Pulling out his phone, David began making calls. He had connections throughout the city police, social services, media. If these children had appeared at Richard's door asking for food, surely there was a way to paint their mother as negligent, unfit. He could have them removed before any real questions arose about their identity. But first he needed more information. David slipped back outside, circling the manor to find a position where he could observe without being seen. Through the kitchen window, he watched Richard interacting with the girls, saw the way his brother's usual stern expression had softened into something dangerously close to affection. In his pocket, David's phone buzzed with responses from his network. Sarah Thompson, single mother, recently unemployed, living in the poorest part of town. No criminal record, but plenty of financial troubles that could be twisted into a narrative of parental unfitness. It would be easy to have social services investigate, to paint her as an unstable mother who sent her children begging in storms. Yet as David watched through the window, he saw something that chilled him more than the rain soaking through his expensive suit. Lucy, the girl wearing the locket, had tilted her head in exactly the same way Emily used to do when considering something important. The resemblance was uncanny, undeniable. Anyone who had known Emily would see it instantly. But the implications were staggering. If these children stayed, if people started asking questions, someone would eventually make the connection. The truth about Emily's disappearance, the manipulated will, the threats, everything David had done to secure his position in the family would come to light. As he stood in the rain, David Anderson began plotting. He had buried the truth once he could do it again. But this time, he would have to move carefully. Richard had already seen the girls, formed a connection. The situation would require a delicate touch, a masterful manipulation of circumstances and people. Little did David know that his presence that night had not gone entirely unnoticed. Hope, the most observant of the triplets, had caught a glimpse of his shadow through the kitchen window. Though she said nothing at the time, she would remember his silhouette, a dark shape watching them through the storm. The discovery came 3 days after the triplets' arrival at Anderson Manor. Richard had been helping Mrs. Sullivan prepare one of the guest rooms for Sarah, who had finally agreed to bring the girls to live in the mansion temporarily. While moving an antique writing desk, a loose floorboard caught his attention. Beneath it lay a wooden box he'd never seen before, its surface dusty, but the lock still gleaming. Inside, wrapped in faded silk, was a letter in Emily's distinctive handwriting. The paper had yellowed with age, but her words remained clear, written in the careful script he remembered so well. Richard's hands trembled as he unfolded it, his heart pounding against his ribs. My dearest Richard, by the time you find this letter, if you ever do, I will be gone. The cancer leaves me little time, and I've chosen to leave this world on my own terms rather than burden our daughter with my slow decline. Yes, Richard, our daughter. Sarah has been the light of my life, the one pure thing to come from our love. I never told you about her. How could I, after your brother David made it clear what would happen if I stayed? He threatened not just my reputation, but the life growing inside me. He showed me documents proof of how he could destroy everything you'd worked for if I didn't disappear. I thought I was protecting both of you by leaving. The truth haunts me now, not just about David's threats, but about your father's will. David showed me the real document before he destroyed it, the one that left half the Anderson fortune to any child you might have. He couldn't risk Sarah's claim to the inheritance, so he made me vanish. I've kept your locket all these years. It's the only thing of value I own, and I've willed it to Sarah. Perhaps someday it will find its way back to you, and with it, the truth. I'm not bitter anymore, Richard. Life has been hard but beautiful. Sarah is everything I could have hoped for in a daughter, strong, kind, resilient. She has 3 beautiful little girls who remind me so much of you. I see your smile in them, your determination. The cancer spreads quickly now. Rather than let Sarah watch me fade away, I've chosen a quicker end. Please don't judge me harshly for this decision. Know that my last thoughts are of you, of the love we shared, and of the grandchildren you may never know. Forever yours, Emily. Richard sat on the dusty floor, the letter clutched in his shaking hands, as waves of grief and rage washed over him. Emily hadn't abandoned him. She'd been driven away by his own brother's machinations. She'd carried their child alone, faced death alone, all because of David's greed and manipulation. The sound of children's laughter drifted up from the garden below, where the triplets were playing under Mrs. Sullivan's watchful eye. His granddaughters no longer strangers, but flesh of his flesh, carrying Emily's spirit and his own blood. The realization of all he'd lost, all that had been stolen from him, hit with physical force. But beneath the grief, another emotion began to surface: determination. Emily was gone, but her letter had given him a weapon: the truth about David's betrayal and the manipulated inheritance. Sarah and the girls were still here, still in need of protection and justice. Standing slowly, Richard folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. He moved to the window, watching the triplets play below. Lucy wore the locket today, Emily's last gift, finding its way home just as she'd hoped. His brother's shadow had hung over their family long enough. It was time for truth, time for justice, time to reclaim what had been stolen from them all. The confrontation between the Anderson brothers erupted in Richard's study on a quiet Sunday afternoon. David had arrived unannounced, ostensibly to discuss a property development proposal, but Richard recognized the calculated gleam in his brother's eye. The letter from Emily burned in Richard's pocket as he watched David settle into the leather chair across from his desk, arranging himself with practiced precision. "I know what you did," Richard said quietly, before David could begin his rehearsed pitch. "I know about Emily, about the threats, about father's real will." David's facade cracked for just a moment, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw before his politician's smile reasserted itself. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about, Richard. Are you feeling well?" Instead of responding, Richard withdrew Emily's letter and began reading it aloud. With each word, the color drained from David's face, his carefully maintained composure crumbling. When Richard reached the part about the manipulated will, David lurched to his feet. "You can't prove any of it," he snapped, mask finally dropping completely. "A suicide note from a desperate woman? Hardly compelling evidence." "But it's not just the letter, is it?" David Richards' voice remained deadly calm. "I've spent the last 3 days investigating. Amazing what people remember when properly motivated. The lawyer who witnessed father's real will, he's still alive. Retired in Florida, but his memory is quite sharp." David sank back into his chair, calculation replacing panic in his eyes. "What do you want? Money? A larger share of the company?" "I want the truth. All of it. Now." What followed was a confession 30 years in the making. David's voice grew bitter as he described living in Richard's shadow, watching his older brother inherit not just the family's wealth but their father's approval. When Richard fell in love with Emily, David saw an opportunity for revenge. "You were throwing everything away for a library assistant," he spat. "Father was ready to disown you, but then he had his stroke, and in his last days he changed his mind. Changed the will. Half of everything would go to your children, if you had any. Even in death, he favored you." David described forging documents, threatening Emily, orchestrating her disappearance. He'd intercepted her letters, paid people to monitor her from afar, ensuring she never returned to Burlington. The pregnancy had been an unexpected complication, but it had only strengthened his resolve to keep her away. "I did you a favor," David insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "You built an empire without distractions. The Anderson name remained untarnished. Everyone won." "Everyone won," Richard's voice shook with rage. "Emily died alone. My daughter grew up in poverty. My granddaughters had to beg for food. And you call that winning? Better than watching you throw away generations of privilege for love," David sneered. "You were always too soft, too romantic. Father knew it. That's why he trusted me to protect the family interests." "Father trusted you," Richard laughed bitterly. "Let me show you something else I found." He pulled out another document, a letter from their father to Emily, dated just days before his death. In it, Jonathan Anderson apologized for his earlier prejudice and blessed her relationship with Richard, expressing hope for their future together. David lunged for the letter, but Richard held it out of reach. "It's already been copied and secured with my lawyers," he said. "Along with Emily's suicide note and sworn statements from several witnesses. You're finished, David." The younger Anderson brother slumped in his chair, decades of manipulation and deceit finally catching up with him. "What are you going to do?" "First, you're going to sign a confession admitting everything you did. Then you're going to transfer half of your assets to a trust for Sarah and the girls their rightful inheritance with 30 years of interest. Finally, you're going to disappear. Leave Burlington. Never contact this family again. And if I refuse..." Richard leaned forward, his voice low and dangerous. "Then I'll take everything from you, your reputation, your position, your freedom." Emily's letter mentions specific crimes, David. Fraud, forgery, extortion. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on all of them. The brothers stared at each other across the desk, 30 years of secrets and lies hanging between them. Finally, David reached for the pen Richard offered. His hand shook as he signed the confession, his signature a jagged surrender. As David left the study, shoulders slumped in defeat, Richard felt no triumph. The victory was hollow, tainted by the knowledge of all that had been lost. But as he heard the triplets' laughter floating up from the garden below, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps something new could grow from the ashes of the past. Sarah Thompson sat in Richard Anderson's study, her mother's suicide note trembling in her hands. Outside, the garden basked in late afternoon sunlight, but inside the wood-paneled room, time seemed to stand still. Richard stood by the window, giving her space to absorb the shocking revelations about her past. "All these years," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I thought you'd abandoned us. Mom never spoke badly of you, but I imagined. I filled in the blanks with my own anger." Richard turned from the window, his face etched with pain. "If I had known about you, Sarah, nothing could have kept me away. Not family, not money, not social status. You have to believe that." Sarah looked up, studying the man who had haunted her imagination for 32 years. She saw her own features reflected in his face, the determined set of the jaw, the intense focus of the eyes. More importantly, she saw the same aching loss she'd carried her entire life. "The locket," she said softly. "Mom always touched it when she talked about the past. Now I understand why she made sure one of the girls wore it every day. She was hoping it would lead us to you." Richard moved closer, hesitantly taking the chair opposite her. "Your mother was extraordinary. The way she raised you alone, gave you her strength, her dignity. I see her in you every day." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks. She never stopped loving you. Even at the end, when the cancer was worst, she would hold that locket and smile. She paused, wrestling with new understanding. She didn't die from the cancer, did she? She chose to leave before it could take everything from her. She was protecting you, until the very end, Richard confirmed gently, just as she protected both of us by leaving all those years ago. Sarah stood abruptly, pacing the study. Anger, grief, and understanding warred in her expression. "Uncle David, he's the reason for all of this? He threatened Mom, forged documents, stole our inheritance." "Yes, and he's going to pay for what he did. I've already secured his confession and arranged for restitution. Half of the Anderson fortune rightfully belongs to you and the girls." Sarah stopped pacing, turning to face him. "I don't care about the money. I care about the years we lost, the times Mom needed her family, the nights I cried myself to sleep wondering why my father didn't want me." Richard crossed the room in 3 strides, pulling his daughter into his arms. She stiffened for a moment before collapsing against his chest, 32 years of longing breaking free in racking sobs. "I'm here now," he murmured into her hair. "I can't change the past, but I promise you'll never be alone again. You or the girls." Through her tears, Sarah managed a weak smile. "The girls adore you already. They've never had a grandfather before." A knock at the study door interrupted them. Lucy, Grace, and Hope peered in, their identical faces concerned at the sight of their mother's tears. "Mom," Lucy asked hesitantly, "are you okay?" Sarah wiped her eyes, opening her arms to her daughters. "Come here, my darlings. There's something you need to know about Mr. Anderson, about your grandfather." The girls rushed forward, enveloping their mother and newly discovered grandfather in a group hug. Richard felt his own tears fall as he held his family, the family he should have had all along. "Does this mean we're really staying?" Hope asked quietly. "Forever." Richard looked at Sarah, waiting for her response. She nodded slowly, a genuine smile breaking through her tears. "Yes, sweetheart. We're staying. We're home." Later that evening, as Richard watched Sarah tucking the girls into bed in their new rooms, he silently thanked Emily. Her love had given him a daughter of extraordinary strength and 3 precious granddaughters. Her final letter had broken the chains of lies that had bound them all. The Anderson Manor, for so long a mausoleum of regrets, echoed with new life. Children's laughter filled its halls, and family bonds, though long delayed, were finally being forged. The transition of Sarah and the triplets into Anderson Manor marked the beginning of a new chapter for everyone involved. The initial weeks were filled with both joy and adjustment as two vastly different worlds merged under one roof. Richard had an entire wing of the mansion renovated specifically for his newfound family, transforming cold, formal spaces into warm, welcoming homes. Sarah's old apartment could have fit entirely within her new bedroom suite. At first she felt overwhelmed by the sheer scale of everything: the high ceilings, the antique furniture, the endless corridors. She would wake up disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was until the sound of her daughter's laughter echoing through the halls brought reality flooding back. The triplets adapted with the resilience of childhood, though each in their own way. Lucy immediately claimed the window seat in their shared playroom, declaring it perfect for reading. Grace transformed one corner into an art studio, her drawings now displayed on walls that had previously held austere portraits. Hope, ever observant, spent hours exploring every nook and cranny of their new home, creating detailed maps of her discoveries. Mrs. Sullivan, who had served the Anderson family for decades, found herself reveling in the chaos the children brought. The kitchen, once a model of sterile efficiency, became a warm hub of family activity. She taught the girls to bake cookies, delighting in their flour-covered faces and eager questions. Richard watched these changes with a mixture of wonder and regret. Each new family moment reminded him of 30 years lost, yet also filled him with gratitude for this second chance. He found himself learning to be both a father and grandfather simultaneously, navigating unfamiliar waters with determination to get it right this time. The first family dinner in the formal dining room proved to be a turning point. The girls, dressed in new clothes Richard had insisted on buying, sat dwarfed by the massive mahogany table. Sarah, still uncomfortable with such luxury, kept apologizing for every small noise or spill. Perhaps Richard suggested, noting everyone's discomfort, we should eat in the kitchen instead. The relief on their faces was immediate. From that day forward, the formal dining room was used only for special occasions, while the warm kitchen became their regular gathering place. Physical changes to the manor reflected the emotional transformations taking place within. The previously immaculate gardens now featured a tire swing and climbing frame. A state-of-the-art playground arose where formal rose beds had once stood. The indoor pool, rarely used before, echoed with splashing and laughter as Richard taught the girls to swim. Sarah insisted on contributing, despite Richard's protests that it wasn't necessary. She took charge of redecorating their wing, incorporating treasured items from their old home alongside new purchases. Emily's photographs found places of honor on walls that had previously held expensive but emotionally empty artwork. The most significant change came in Richard himself. The stern businessman gave way to a doting grandfather who could often be found on the floor, playing board games or attempting to braid hair with varying degrees of success. His rare smile became a regular feature, especially when surrounded by his granddaughters. Yet shadows lingered at the edges of their newfound happiness. The wider Anderson social circle buzzed with gossip about Richard's charity case family. Some longtime associates stopped calling. Others made thinly veiled comments about DNA tests and gold diggers. Sarah felt these barbs keenly, though she tried to hide her pain from her daughters. Richard, however, noticed everything. Each slight against his daughter and granddaughters strengthened his resolve to protect them. He began systematically distancing himself from those who couldn't accept his family, no matter how influential they might be in Burlington's social circles. The discovery of Emily's old journal in a box of Sarah's belongings brought both pain and healing. Reading it together, father and daughter found new understanding of the woman they'd both loved. The journal detailed Emily's struggles, but also her unwavering hope that someday her daughter would find her way back to her father. As autumn turned to winter, Anderson Manor underwent its final transformation from museum-like mansion to true family home. The sound of children singing Christmas carols replaced the usual silent halls. Handmade decorations appeared alongside priceless antiques. Even the stern portraits of Anderson ancestors seemed to soften in the warm glow of new memories being made. The first real confrontation happened at the Burlington Country Club's annual winter gala. Richard had insisted his family attend, determined to establish their rightful place in society. Sarah wore a designer dress that felt like a costume, while the triplets were dressed in matching velvet dresses that made them look like princesses from a fairy tale. The whispers started the moment they entered the grand ballroom. Old money families huddled in corners, their disapproving murmurs barely concealed behind crystal champagne flutes. Victoria Ashworth, the club's social director and Richard's former admirer, made her way directly to them. "Richard, darling," she cooed, deliberately ignoring Sarah. "How charitable of you to bring your guests to such an exclusive event, though perhaps the children would be more comfortable in the nursery with the staff's little ones." Before Richard could respond, Sarah stepped forward, her mother's quiet dignity evident in every movement. "My daughters are Andersons, Mrs. Ashworth. Their place is here with their grandfather." The tension crackled through the air like electricity. Victoria's perfectly painted smile froze. Of course, if that's what you believe. Though I must say the resemblance to dear Emily Thompson is quite remarkable. One might almost suspect it was planned. Lucy, always protective of her mother, spoke up clearly. "Our grandmother was Emily Thompson. She wore this locket, she touched the golden heart at her throat, its presence a testament to their legitimacy." Victoria's eyes narrowed at the mention of Emily. "Yes, I remember her. Such a tragic story. Working-class girl with big dreams, trying to climb the social ladder. History does have a way of repeating itself, doesn't it?" Richard's voice cut through the growing tension like steel. "Emily Thompson was worth more than this entire room combined, Victoria, and Sarah has achieved more through her own merit than most here have managed with all their privileges." The confrontation attracted attention. Other guests gathered, some openly hostile, others merely curious. Grace clutched her mother's hand, while Hope watched everything with her characteristic silent intensity. Margaret Sterling, the grand dame of Burlington society, pushed through the crowd. "Really, Richard," she declared loudly, "you can't expect us to accept this situation without question. What proof do you have these people are who they claim to be?" Sarah stiffened, but before she could respond, a new voice joined the fray. Elizabeth Canterbury, Richard's oldest friend and respected judge, stepped forward. "I have proof," Elizabeth announced, her judicial authority evident in every word. "I was there the day Emily left town. I saw what your precious social circle did to that poor girl, and now I see you trying to do the same to her daughter." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Elizabeth was not someone they could easily dismiss. "Furthermore," she continued, "I've seen the DNA results Richard had done. Sarah is unquestionably his daughter, which makes these beautiful girls his granddaughters. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally." Victoria retreated, but the damage was done. Throughout the evening, Sarah and the girls faced subtle snubs and barely concealed hostility. Yet they held their heads high, drawing strength from each other and Richard's unwavering support. Later that night, as they drove home, Sarah finally let her tears fall. "Maybe this was a mistake," she whispered. "They'll never accept us." "Then they don't deserve to know you," Richard declared firmly. "I've spent too many years caring about what those people think. They took your mother from me once. I won't let them hurt our family again." The girls, unusually quiet in the back seat, absorbed this exchange. Finally, Hope spoke up. "Mom, remember what Grandma Emily wrote in her journal? True worth isn't in your bank account or your last name, but in how you treat others and face adversity." Sarah reached back to squeeze her daughter's hand, amazed once again by her children's wisdom. "You're right, sweetheart. We're Andersons, but more importantly, we're Emily Thompson's family. We won't let anyone shame us for that." The incident marked a turning point. Rather than trying to fit into Burlington's elite social circle, the family began creating their own community. Richard opened Anderson Manor for charitable events, particularly those supporting single mothers and educational initiatives, causes Emily would have championed. Despite his apparent surrender, David Anderson wasn't finished. From his temporary exile in Boston, he began orchestrating a careful campaign to undermine Sarah's position in the family. It started subtly anonymous tips to local newspapers questioning her sudden appearance, carefully planted rumors about her past, suggestions of manipulation and fraud. The first major attack came through the Burlington Daily Herald. A front-page article detailed Sarah's history of financial struggles, painting her as an opportunist who had deliberately sent her children to Richard's door. The story included interviews with anonymous sources describing her as an unfit mother who had frequently left her children unsupervised. Sarah discovered the article while having breakfast with the girls. Her hands shook as she read, recognizing David's influence in every carefully crafted insinuation. The triplets, sensing their mother's distress, gathered around her protectively. "Mom," Lucy said firmly, "we know the truth. Everyone who matters knows the truth." Richard's response was swift and decisive. He immediately called a press conference, standing before cameras and reporters with Sarah and the girls beside him. His voice rang with authority as he addressed the allegations. "My daughter Sarah Thompson Anderson has shown more strength, dignity and parental devotion than most people blessed with wealth and privilege," he declared. "Any suggestion otherwise is not only false but malicious. We will be pursuing legal action against those responsible for these libelous claims." But David had more weapons in his arsenal. Anonymous complaints to Child Protective Services triggered a series of invasive investigations. Though each investigation cleared Sarah completely, the emotional toll was heavy. The girls began having nightmares about being taken away from their mother. Then came the financial attacks. Old debts suddenly resurfaced, mysteriously purchased by collection agencies that pursued Sarah aggressively. Her previous landlord filed a fraudulent lawsuit claiming thousands in damages. Each attack was clearly designed to paint her as irresponsible and untrustworthy. The turning point came when Hope, ever observant, noticed a familiar figure watching their house. "Mom," she whispered one evening, "that's the man I saw the night we came here. He was watching us through the window." Sarah alerted Richard, who immediately hired private investigators. They uncovered a network of people paid by David to monitor and harass the family. More importantly, they discovered evidence linking David to the fraudulent claims and planted stories. The final confrontation played out in Richard's study. David had returned to Burlington, believing his schemes were working. He arrived at Anderson Manor unannounced, expecting to find chaos and division. Instead, he found Sarah waiting with Richard, armed with evidence of every plot and manipulation. "Did you really think I wouldn't protect them?" Richard asked his brother coldly. "Did you learn nothing from what happened with Emily?" David's composure cracked. "They're destroying everything our family built. Look at this house overrun with children, charity cases filling the halls. The Anderson name meant something once." Sarah stood, facing her uncle directly. "The Anderson name means something now. It means family, compassion and justice. Everything my mother saw in my father, everything you tried to destroy." "You have no right," David spat. "You're nothing but a gold digger's daughter." The study door opened, revealing the triplets standing with Elizabeth Canterbury. The judge held up a file. "Actually, Mr. Anderson, these documents prove otherwise. Not only is Sarah legally entitled to her inheritance, but we've uncovered evidence of your criminal activities spanning 3 decades. David lunged for the papers, but Richard intervened, physically restraining his brother. "It's over, David. Leave Burlington. Leave our family alone, or I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life paying for what you did to Emily." As David was escorted from the property, Sarah hugged her daughters close. The last attempt to destroy their family had failed, strengthening their bonds instead of breaking them. Richard joined their embrace, finally free from his brother's toxic influence. That evening, as the family gathered in the kitchen for dinner, Hope made an observation that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "Grandma Emily's locket brought us home," she said, touching the golden heart. "It protected us, just like she wanted it to." The annual Anderson Corporation shareholders meeting became the battleground where Sarah would face her greatest challenge yet. Richard had announced his intention to name her as his successor, and the corporate world erupted in skepticism and barely concealed hostility. Sarah stood at the podium of the grand conference room, facing rows of questioning faces. Despite her new designer suit and carefully styled hair, she could feel them dismissing her, the former factory worker, the single mother, the charity case. But Emily Thompson's daughter hadn't spent years fighting survival to falter now. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart, "I know many of you have questions about my qualifications to lead Anderson Corporation." She paused, meeting the hostile stares directly. "You see someone who worked in a factory, who struggled to feed her children. I see someone who managed a household on minimum wage, who never missed a bill payment despite impossible odds, who taught herself business administration through online courses while her children slept." In the front row, Richard beamed with pride. Next to him, the triplets sat in matching blue dresses, watching their mother with complete confidence. Lucy clutched Emily's locket, a gesture that had become their family's source of strength. Sarah continued, launching into a detailed presentation of her vision for the company. She had spent months preparing, studying every aspect of the business, developing innovative proposals for modernization and expansion. Her natural intelligence, combined with years of practical problem-solving experience, gave her insights that surprised even the most skeptical board members. But the real test came during the question-and-answer session. Marcus Wellington, a major shareholder and David's former ally, stood up with a smirk. "Impressive memorization, Ms. Thompson. But running $1 billion corporation requires more than reciting facts. How can someone who couldn't even maintain steady employment expect to manage our investments?" Before Richard could intervene, Sarah responded calmly. "Mr. Wellington, when you lose your job because a factory closes, you don't have the luxury of family connections or trust funds. You adapt, you learn, you fight. I managed to keep 3 children healthy, educated, and hopeful despite poverty that would break most people in this room. I built a network of mutual support in a community that had nothing but faith in each other." She pulled up a new slide, displaying a detailed analysis of community-based business initiatives. "This is the future of corporate success, understanding and investing in the communities we serve. While you've been watching your stock portfolios, I've been living in the real world where your decisions affect actual lives." Her words struck home. Several younger board members began nodding in agreement. Even Wellington looked taken aback by her passionate articulation of a new business vision. Grace suddenly stood up, her small voice carrying clearly, "Mom always says Grandma Emily taught her that true leadership means lifting others up, not pushing them down." A murmur ran through the room. Everyone knew Emily Thompson's story by now, the woman who had chosen integrity over comfort, whose strength lived on in her daughter and granddaughters. Elizabeth Canterbury, now a significant shareholder herself, rose to her feet. "I move to approve Sarah Thompson Anderson as CEO in training, effective immediately. Those in favor?" Hands began rising throughout the room. Even Wellington, after a long moment, raised his hand. The motion passed overwhelmingly. As applause filled the room, Sarah felt tears threatening. She had done it not just for herself, but for her mother, her daughters, and every person who had ever been dismissed because of their background. Later that evening, celebrating at Anderson Manor, Richard hugged his daughter tightly. "Emily would be so proud of you," he whispered. "I know I am." The revelation came during a routine audit of Anderson Corporation's historical records. Sarah, now fully immersed in her role as CEO in training, had ordered a complete digital archiving of all company documents. But it was Hope, visiting her mother's office after school, who first noticed something unusual in the old financial statements. "Mum," she said, studying a yellow document with her characteristic intensity, "why are there two different versions of the same report from 1990? Sarah looked up from her computer, intrigued by her daughter's discovery. The documents in question showed identical dates but drastically different figures. One version, clearly the original, indicated a substantial trust fund established in Emily Thompson's name. The second version, which had become the official record, showed no such fund. "Richard," Sarah called her father's office immediately. "I think you need to see this." Within an hour, Richard, Sarah, and Elizabeth Canterbury were poring over boxes of old financial records. The deeper they dug, the more evidence they uncovered of David's systematic theft. Not only had he destroyed the original will, but he had also embezzled millions meant for Emily and any future heirs. "Look at this," Elizabeth said, holding up a bank statement. Regular transfers to offshore accounts, all authorized by David, starting the exact month Emily left town. He didn't just threaten her away, he stole everything your grandfather intended for her. Richard's hands trembled as he examined the documents. He used the money to build his own business empire. Everything he has, it was built with your inheritance. The scale of the theft was staggering. With compound interest over 30 years, the stolen funds would amount to nearly $500 million. But more than the money, it was the calculated cruelty of the theft that shocked them. David had systematically erased every financial provision made for his brother's child, ensuring that Emily and Sarah would struggle in poverty while he prospered from their stolen wealth. Lucy, who had joined them with her sisters, picked up an old photograph that had fallen from one of the boxes. It showed a young Emily standing in front of the Anderson Corporation building, proudly wearing the locket that now hung around Lucy's neck. "She knew, didn't she?" Lucy asked softly. "That's why she kept the locket. It was proof she belonged here." Sarah hugged her daughter close, fighting back tears. "Your grandmother was incredibly smart. She must have suspected David would try to erase her existence. This locket, it was her way of making sure we could prove our connection to the Anderson family." Elizabeth was already on her phone, consulting with her legal team. "This is far beyond civil fraud," she declared. "We're looking at criminal charges: embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. David won't be able to talk his way out of this one." Richard sat heavily in his chair, the weight of 3 decades of betrayal crushing down on him. "All those years, while Emily struggled to survive, while you grew up without basic necessities, my own brother was living off money that should have been yours." The investigation moved quickly. Elizabeth's team uncovered a trail of fraudulent documents and hidden accounts that stretched across multiple countries. David had been meticulous in his theft, but his very precision became evidence of his crimes. Each transaction, each forged document, added another link in the chain of proof. The discovery made headlines across New England. Anderson heir uncovers decades-long family fraud. David, confronted with irrefutable evidence, attempted to flee the country, but was arrested at Boston Logan International Airport. His empire, built on stolen wealth, began to crumble. For Sarah, the revelation brought mixed emotions. The money meant security for her daughters, justice for her mother's memory, but it couldn't erase the years of hardship they had endured. Yet as she watched her girls playing in what was now truly their home, she realized that perhaps those struggles had given them something money couldn't buy: strength, compassion, and an unshakable family bond. The news of Sarah's vindication spread quickly through her old neighborhood on Maple Street. As the story of David's fraud made headlines, the community that had supported Sarah and her daughters through their hardest times rallied once again, but this time in celebration. Mrs. Rodriguez organized a block party in front of her corner store. the same store where she had once slipped extra food into Sarah's grocery bags. The entire street turned out families who had watched the triplets while Sarah worked, neighbors who had shared what little they had during tough times, children who had played with Lucy Grace and hoped despite their worn clothes and empty pockets. "You see," Mrs. Rodriguez said, hugging Sarah tightly, "we always knew you were special. Emily raised you right, rich or poor. You never forgot who you were." The celebration grew as more people arrived. Mr. Johnson brought trays of fresh bread from his bakery, no-day-old discounts needed this time. Children played in the street while adults shared stories of Emily and Sarah's impact on their community. Richard attended at Sarah's insistence, feeling simultaneously out of place in his expensive suit and oddly at home among these genuine, warm-hearted people. He watched in amazement as person after person approached Sarah with tales of kindness, times she had helped with childcare, shared her last cup of sugar, or simply offered a shoulder to cry on. "Your daughter, Mrs. Martinez," told Richard, her eyes glistening. "She helped my Josie learn to read when the school wanted to hold him back. Spent every Tuesday evening with him, patient as a saint. Now he's in college, first in our family." The triplets moved through the crowd like little princesses, but not because of their new clothes or their grandfather's wealth. These people had known them when they had nothing, had loved them for who they were rather than what they had. Sarah stood on Mrs. Rodriguez's front steps, addressing the gathered crowd. "Everything I am, everything I've achieved, started here on Maple Street. You were our family when we had no one else. You taught my girls that true wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in how we care for each other." She announced her plans to establish the Emily Thompson Community Foundation, dedicated to supporting education and small businesses in the neighborhood. The foundation would provide scholarships, business grants, and resources for families struggling as she once had. Mom Grace tugged at Sarah's sleeve. "Can we show them the surprise now?" Sarah nodded, and Richard stepped forward. "The Anderson Corporation is buying the old factory," he announced. "We're converting it into a community center with job training facilities, daycare, and a medical clinic. Sarah will oversee the project personally." The cheers that erupted were deafening. The factory's closure had devastated the community. Its transformation represented hope and renewal. Later, as the sun set and children chased fireflies in the gathering dusk, Richard found Sarah sitting on her old front porch steps. "Now I understand," he said softly, joining her. "This is what Emily wanted for us, not just wealth or social status, but the richness of real community." Sarah leaned against her father's shoulder. "When I first moved to Anderson Manor, I was afraid we'd lose these connections, this sense of belonging. But Mom always said true family isn't about blood or money. It's about the bonds we forge through love and loyalty." As if to prove her point, Mrs. Rodriguez appeared with plates of her famous empanadas, shooing away Richard's attempt to pay. "Family doesn't pay," she insisted. "Besides, these are for my girls," she winked at the triplets, who had appeared at the mere scent of their favorite treat. The evening ended with the impromptu talent show, the same one the community had held every summer, though Sarah's girls now wore designer dresses instead of handmade costumes. Yet their performances, Lucy's singing, Grace's art display, Hope's poetry reading, remained as genuine and heartfelt as ever. The truth about Emily Thompson's death emerged on a cold winter morning, hidden within a stack of medical records that had been sealed for 5 years. Sarah sat in Dr. Catherine Morgan's office, the elderly physician who had treated her mother in her final days, listening as a very different story unfolded from the one she'd always believed. "Your mother didn't die from cancer progression," Dr. Morgan explained gently, sliding a file across her desk. "The cancer was terminal, yes, but that's not what took her life. She made a choice, Sarah. A deliberate choice to leave on her own terms." Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the file. Inside were detailed notes, prescription records, and a letter Emily had written to her doctor. The words blurred through her tears as she read her mother's final confession. "I always wondered," Sarah whispered, "why she seemed so peaceful that last day. She had arranged everything so carefully, the photos organized, the bills paid ahead, even Christmas presents wrapped for the girls. Dr. Morgan nodded solemnly. Emily was determined to spare you the pain of watching her decline. She knew the cancer would eventually leave her unable to care for herself, dependent on you when you were already struggling to support 3 young children. The medical records revealed Emily's careful planning. She had stockpiled sleeping pills over several months, telling no one of her intentions. The night she died, she had written letters to Sarah and the girls, timed to arrive on their 18th birthday, explaining her decision. Richard, who had accompanied Sarah to the appointment, gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. She faced this alone, he said hoarsely, just like everything else alone because of my family's cruelty. The doctor pulled out one final document, a letter Emily had written to her just days before her death. She asked me to keep this until the right time. I think that time is now. Sarah read the letter aloud, her voice breaking. Dear Dr. Morgan, by the time you share this, I hope Sarah will have found her way to Richard. The cancer leaves me little choice about dying, but I can choose how to leave this world. I won't let my daughter destroy herself trying to care for me while raising 3 children in poverty. Tell her I wasn't afraid. Tell her that every moment of struggle was worth it because it gave me her, and through her 3 beautiful granddaughters who carry our strength. The locket I leave them isn't just jewelry, it's the key to their heritage, their future. Most importantly, tell Sarah that my choice wasn't about giving up. It was about giving her the freedom to find her path without the burden of watching me suffer. A mother's last gift to her child sometimes means knowing when to let go. With gratitude, N.B. Emily Thompson. The revelation shook both Sarah and Richard to their cores. Emily's final act had been one of sacrifice and love, protecting her family in the only way she felt she could. That evening, Sarah gathered her daughters to share the truth about their grandmother's passing. The girls, now old enough to understand, listened with tears streaming down their faces as their mother explained Emily's choice. She loved us so much, Lucy said, clutching the locket, that she made the hardest choice of all. Like when you chose to ask for help that night in the storm, Hope added quietly. Sometimes the bravest thing is knowing when you need to change the story. Grace, ever the artist, disappeared to her room and returned with a portrait she'd drawn of Emily, based on photographs and family stories. She'll always be with us, she declared, hanging the picture in a place of honor. Richard watched his family process this new truth, seeing Emily's strength reflected in each of them. Her final sacrifice had ultimately led them here to healing and reunion, though the price had been desperately high. The full extent of David Anderson's treachery came to light during his criminal trial. The courthouse was packed as prosecutors revealed evidence that went far beyond financial fraud and stolen inheritance. Through meticulous investigation, they had uncovered David's darkest secret. He had actively prevented Emily from receiving medical treatment that might have saved her life. Sarah sat in the front row beside Richard, gripping her father's hand as the district attorney presented a series of damning emails. David had used his influence on the hospital board to block Emily's application for an experimental cancer treatment program. More devastatingly, he had intercepted and destroyed letters from a medical research foundation offering to cover her treatment costs. The defendant, the prosecutor announced, didn't just steal the victim's inheritance. He systematically eliminated every chance she had for survival, ensuring that his theft would remain undiscovered. Emily Thompson's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was the direct result of calculated malice. David sat at the defense table, his expensive suit now wrinkled, his face ashen. When his eyes met Sarah's across the courtroom, he quickly looked away, unable to face the weight of his actions. The evidence continued to mount. A former nurse testified about receiving threats after trying to help Emily access treatment. Bank records showed payments to private investigators who had monitored Emily's declining health, reporting back to David regularly. I kept everything the private investigator testified, his voice heavy with regret. Mr. Anderson wanted weekly updates on her condition. He needed to know when she wouldn't be able to fight back anymore. The most damning testimony came from David's former secretary. She described finding a letter from Emily begging for help with medical bills sent just months before her death. Mr. Anderson read it, laughed, and said, "Let nature take its course," then he made me shred it. Richard listened to each revelation with growing horror. His brother hadn't just betrayed the family, he had effectively murdered Emily through calculated negligence. The weight of this knowledge seemed to age him visibly as the trial progressed. The triplets, though protected from the worst details, understood enough to be devastated. He watched her die, Lucy whispered to her sisters during a court recess. He knew about Grandma Emily being sick and did nothing. Hope, ever observant, added quietly, "That's why he was watching us that night at the mansion. He was afraid we'd discover everything." Grace, who had been sketching throughout the proceedings, showed her mother a drawing she'd made Emily's locket, broken in half with dark shadows seeping out. The locket kept his secrets, she explained, until we were ready to find them. When David finally took the stand in his own defense, his attempts at justification only revealed deeper layers of cruelty. The Anderson name had to be protected, he insisted. Emily Thompson was a threat to everything our family had built. Her death was unfortunate but necessary. The gasps that filled the courtroom at this admission sealed his fate. The jury took less than 2 hours to return a guilty verdict on all counts: fraud, embezzlement, and criminally negligent homicide. At the sentencing hearing, Sarah stood to deliver her victim impact statement. Her voice was steady as she addressed the court. "My mother died believing she was protecting her family by leaving this world on her own terms, but now we know her choice was forced by a man who saw her life as nothing more than an inconvenience. David Anderson didn't just steal our inheritance, he stole years we could have had with her. Memories we could have made, love we could have shared." The attempt to publicly humiliate Sarah came during the Anderson Corporation's centennial celebration, orchestrated by Victoria Ashworth and David's remaining allies. The grand ballroom of the Burlington Plaza Hotel was filled with the city's elite, media representatives, and business partners from across the country. Sarah had just finished delivering her keynote speech about the company's new direction when Victoria approached the podium, champagne glass in hand. "Such inspiring words from our new CEO," she said, her voice dripping with full sweetness. "Perhaps now is the perfect time to share some recently discovered footage of the Thompson family's humble beginnings." The large screens around the ballroom flickered to life, showing grainy security camera footage of 3 small girls, the triplets, taking food from Mrs. Rodriguez's store. The footage had been carefully edited to remove Mrs. Rodriguez's kind gesture of giving them extra items, making it appear as theft. "Is this the kind of leadership the Anderson Corporation needs?" Victoria's voice rang out. "Someone who taught her children to steal." The audience murmured, but before panic could spread, Mrs. Rodriguez herself stood up from her table. Sarah had insisted on inviting her old neighbors to the celebration, knowing they were as much a part of her success story as anyone. "You want to talk about theft?" Mrs. Rodriguez called out, her accent thick with emotion. "Let me tell you about real theft. These children never stole anything. I gave them food because their mother worked 3 jobs to keep them alive, while their inheritance was being stolen by your precious David Anderson." Lucy, Grace, and Hope stood together, holding hands. Lucy touched the locket at her throat and stepped forward. "We're not ashamed of our past," she declared, her young voice clear and strong. "Our mother taught us that true character shows in how you handle hardship, not how you wear privilege." The screen suddenly changed, now showing new footage, surveillance videos from Anderson Manor the night the girls first arrived. The storm, their courage, the moment Richard recognized Emily's locket. Elizabeth Canterbury had prepared this counter-narrative, knowing Victoria might try something dramatic. "You want to talk about beginnings?" Sarah finally spoke, her voice steady. Let's talk about how three little girls braved a storm to save their family. Let's talk about how a community came together to support its own while the wealthy turned their backs. Let's talk about justice, resilience, and the true meaning of family legacy. Richard joined his daughter at the podium, placing a protective arm around her shoulders. The Anderson Corporation's future lies not in preserving old prejudices, but in building bridges between communities. My daughter and granddaughters have taught me that wealth means nothing without compassion and integrity. Victoria's attempt at humiliation backfired spectacularly. The gathered media seized on the story of redemption and justice rather than scandal. Photos of the triplets with their mother and grandfather, all wearing proud smiles despite Victoria's attack, made the front pages instead of the manufactured controversy. Mrs. Rodriguez hosted an impromptu after-party at her store, now a thriving supermarket thanks to Sarah's community investment program. The city's elite found themselves mingling with Sarah's old neighbors, learning firsthand about the impact of her leadership on real lives. Grace captured the moment in a sketch, her mother standing tall at the podium, the locket gleaming around Lucy's neck, Hope's quiet smile of triumph, and their grandfather's protective presence, all surrounded by both their old community and their new supporters. Mum, Hope said as they drove home that night, Victoria didn't understand. She thought showing where we came from would shame us, but it just showed how far we've come. Sarah hugged her daughters close, grateful for their wisdom. The attempt to humiliate them had instead showcased their strength, turning a potential scandal into a testament of their journey. The discovery came while renovating Emily's old house on Maple Street. Sarah had purchased it as part of the community revival project, intending to turn it into a women's resource center. As workers removed old wallpaper in what had been Emily's bedroom, they found a hidden compartment containing a leather-bound diary and a stack of unopened letters. Sarah's hands trembled as she opened the diary in Anderson Manor's library, surrounded by her family. The first entry was dated 30 years ago, the day after she'd left Burlington. Dearest Richard, I write these words knowing you may never read them. Today I left everything I love to protect everything I love. Your brother showed me proof of what he could do not just to me but to you. The baby I carry, our baby, Richard, will never know poverty if I accept his terms. A trust fund in exchange for my disappearance. But David lied. The money never came, and now I understand he never intended to honor our agreement. Yet I can't return. The threats against you, against our unborn child, are too real. Richard had to stop reading, overcome with emotion. The triplets huddled closer to their mother as Sarah continued reading entries that chronicled Emily's life, her struggles, her triumphs, her undying love for Richard, and her fierce determination to protect Sarah. A later entry revealed more shocking truths. Sarah started college today, community classes when she can afford them. I've been saving every spare penny, but it's not enough. Today, I tried contacting the Anderson family lawyer about the trust fund your father set up for any grandchildren. David intercepted me at the office. His threat was clear: if I pursued any claims, he would destroy Sarah's chances at education, at a future. I left in tears, but with my head held high. Our daughter will succeed through her own strength, not their money. Lucy found a series of letters Emily had written to Richard but never sent, each one documenting David's systematic destruction of their lives. One letter detailed how David had blocked Emily's job applications at every major company in Burlington, forcing her to take minimum wage work to survive. The most heartbreaking entry came near the end, dated just weeks before Emily's death. The cancer spreads quickly now. David's final cruelty was ensuring I couldn't access the experimental treatment that might have saved me, but he underestimates the power of a mother's love. I've left a trail, documents, letters, proof of his crimes, hidden where only Sarah would think to look. The locket you gave me, Richard, will lead our family back together when the time is right. To our grandchildren, who I pray will someday read this, never let anyone make you ashamed of who you are or where you come from. Your mother is the best of both, Richard, and me, strong enough to survive poverty, gentle enough to keep her heart open to love. Richard, my love, if you read this, please know that every choice I made was out of love for you, For Sarah, for the future we dreamed of but never got to share. Forgive me for not being stronger, for not fighting harder. But most of all, forgive yourself. We were both victims of circumstances beyond our control. The final pages contained detailed accounts of David's manipulations, carefully documented evidence of his crimes, and Emily's hopes for Sarah's future. She had transformed her diary into a weapon of justice, knowing it would eventually be found. The prison visiting room was stark and cold as Sarah and Richard faced David Anderson across a metal table. 3 months into his sentence, he had requested this meeting, claiming he had more to confess. The once proud businessman now wore standard prison orange, his carefully maintained appearance replaced by hollow eyes and trembling hands. Emily's diary, David began, his voice hoarse. I've read the transcripts in the newspaper. There's more. So much more that I need to tell you. Sarah sat silently, her father's hand gripping hers under the table. The strength of Emily's written words had given her the courage to face her uncle one last time. I didn't just steal the money, David continued. I destroyed her life systematically, methodically. Every job application, every apartment rental, every loan application, I made sure they were all rejected. I wanted her to suffer, to regret ever becoming involved with the Anderson family. Richard's voice was deadly quiet. Why, David? She was carrying my child, your niece. David's composure cracked. Because she made you happy, the words exploded from him. You had everything fathers love, the company leadership, the respect I craved. Emily would have completed your perfect life, given you the family I could never have. I couldn't bear it. He pulled out a worn envelope. This arrived yesterday from my former secretary. Letters from Emily that I ordered destroyed, but she kept copies. His hands shook as he pushed them across the table. She begged for help with Sarah's college fund, for assistance with medical bills. Each time, I responded with silence or threats. Sarah opened one letter, reading her mother's desperate plea for cancer treatment funds. The date matched the period when the experimental therapy might have saved her life. I watched her die, David whispered, tears now flowing freely. I received weekly reports on her decline, knowing I could have prevented it. The power. It was intoxicating at first, but now he gestured helplessly at his prison uniform. Now it haunts me. Every night I see her face. I hear the triplets' voices in that storm. Hope saw you that night, Sarah said quietly, through the kitchen window. She remembers your shadow watching us. David flinched. I almost stopped then, seeing those 3 little girls so much like Emily. But pride and fear kept me silent. I'd built my entire life on that first lie, and each new deception had to be protected with another, until I couldn't find my way back to the truth. He pulled out one final document, a handwritten confession detailing every act of sabotage, every manipulated document, every orchestrated hardship. It won't bring Emily back or give Sarah back her childhood, but perhaps it will help with the civil suits, ensure her daughter's future. Richard studied his brother, seeing for the first time the depth of his torment. You destroyed so many lives, David, including your own. I know. David's voice broke. The worst part is knowing that Emily never became bitter, never let Sarah hate me. Her diary. She wrote about hoping I would find peace, find redemption. How could she be so forgiving when I showed no mercy? Sarah finally spoke, her voice steady. Because she understood something you never did, Uncle David. True strength isn't in destroying others to elevate yourself. It's in remaining kind despite cruelty, hopeful despite hardship. She stood, touching the locket at her throat. She had borrowed it from Lucy for this meeting. My mother's legacy isn't the money you stole or the opportunities you destroyed. It's the love and resilience she passed down to me, and I'm passing to my daughters. David reached out as if to touch the locket, then let his hand fall. Can you ever forgive me? That's not why we came, Sarah replied quietly. We came so you could finally tell the truth to us, but mostly to yourself. The final pieces of the puzzle emerged from an unexpected source. A week after David's confession, Elizabeth Canterbury received a call from Jonathan Anderson's former butler, now in his 90s, living in a retirement home in Maine. He had maintained a secret archive of documents, protecting them for 30 years, waiting for the right moment to reveal the truth. Richard and Sarah drove to Maine together, the fall colors painting the countryside in shades of gold and crimson. They found George Phillips alert and clear-minded despite his age, sitting in a sun-filled room surrounded by carefully preserved boxes. "I've been following your story in the papers," the elderly man said, his hands trembling slightly as he opened the first box. "Your father, Mr. Richard, he knew David might try something. The night he changed his will, he gave me copies of everything: the original will, trust documents, even personal letters he wrote to Emily." The documents he revealed told a story that brought both tears and healing. Jonathan Anderson's original will was there, explicitly providing for any grandchildren Richard might have. But more touching were the personal letters he had written to Emily, never delivered due to David's interference. "My dear Emily, one letter read, 'I was wrong about you. Pride and prejudice blinded me to your true worth. As I face my mortality, I realize that happiness and love matter more than social status. Richard lights up when he speaks of you. I've changed my will to ensure your future together is secure. Please forgive an old man's previous harshness.'" Sarah wiped tears as she read her grandfather's words. He changed his mind. He accepted Mom. George nodded, pulling out more papers. Mr. Jonathan spent his final days trying to right his wrongs. He established trust funds not just for potential grandchildren, but for educational programs in working-class neighborhoods. David destroyed most of the documentation, but I kept these copies safe. Among the papers was a photograph Sarah had never seen her grandfather holding a letter from Emily, his expression soft as he read it. On the back was written Emily Thompson's response to my apology: "A grace I don't deserve." The most damning evidence came in the form of documentation showing how David had systematically dismantled his father's final wishes. Bank transfers, forged signatures, altered documents, all meticulously preserved by the loyal butler who had served the Anderson family for over 50 years. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Richard asked gently. George's eyes filled with tears. "I promised your father I would wait until the right moment, when the truth would be heard rather than buried. When I saw those 3 little girls on the news, wearing Emily's locket, I knew the time had come." The documents he provided went beyond proving the inheritance. They revealed Jonathan Anderson's complete transformation from a prejudiced patriarch to a man who recognized the true meaning of family legacy. His final letters spoke of hopes for a future where the Anderson name would stand for compassion rather than mere wealth. Sarah found herself especially moved by a letter her grandfather had written to his unborn grandchildren, to those who will carry the Anderson name into the future. "May you inherit your mother Emily's kindness and your father Richard's integrity. True nobility lies not in bank accounts or social status, but in how we treat those society overlooks." Before they left, George handed Sarah one final envelope. "Your grandfather wrote this for you specifically, Miss Sarah. He somehow knew you existed, though he never got to meet you." Inside was a letter dated just days before Jonathan Anderson's death. "My dear granddaughter, though I may never know your face, I carry you in my heart. Your mother Emily has shown me that character transcends class, that love is the truest measure of worth. I've arranged for your future, though I fear my son David's jealousy may complicate your path. If you're reading this, you've found your way home despite the obstacles. Know that you were wanted, loved, and provided for not just with money, but with the higher inheritance of your mother's grace and your father's strength. With love and hope. Your grandfather." Richard and Sarah drove back to Burlington in contemplative silence, the box of documents secure in the back seat. They had found not just legal proof of Sarah's inheritance, but something far more valuable: evidence that love and truth can transcend time and prejudice to heal even the deepest family wounds. 1 year into his prison sentence, David Anderson began his journey toward redemption in an unexpected way. Through the prison's educational program, he started teaching business skills to fellow inmates, many of whom came from the same underprivileged backgrounds he had once despised. The transformation became evident during the prison's family visitation day. Sarah had brought the triplets, responding to David's written request to apologize to them personally. They found him in the visiting room, noticeably changed, the arrogance gone from his bearing, replaced by genuine humility. "I've spent my life looking down on people I thought were beneath me," David told them quietly. "Now I understand what Emily always knew, that dignity and worth have nothing to do with bank accounts or social status." Lucy, still wearing her grandmother's locket, studied her great-uncle carefully. "Have you learned to be kind?" she asked directly, with a child's simple wisdom. David's eyes filled with tears. "I'm trying," he answered honestly. "Your grandmother wrote in her diary that everyone deserves a chance at redemption. I didn't understand then, but I do now." He showed them a scrapbook of his work in the prison literacy programs he'd started, a mentoring system for younger inmates, even a small business development course teaching entrepreneurial skills. Each page documented a small step toward atonement. Grace noticed something familiar about the artwork decorating the prison classroom walls. "These look like Mum's community center designs," she observed. David nodded. "I asked Sarah to send me the plans for Emily's resource center. I'm using them as a model here, teaching others how to create positive change in their communities." Hope, ever perceptive, touched one of the drawings. "You're trying to fix what you broke," she said softly. "Yes," David replied. "Though I know I can never fully repair the damage I've done, I can try to create something positive from my mistakes." Sarah watched this interaction with mixed emotions. The man who had caused her mother so much pain was genuinely trying to change. She saw it in the way other inmates greeted him with respect, in the proud displays of JED certificates his students had earned, in the business plans developed by his entrepreneurship class. During their regular visits over the following months, they witnessed David's continued transformation. He used his business expertise to help former inmates start legitimate enterprises, worked with addiction recovery programs, and even started a scholarship fund for children of incarcerated parents. The turning point came when David voluntarily testified against his former business associates who had helped him persecute Emily, ensuring that all parties involved in the decades-long conspiracy faced justice. His testimony helped recover additional stolen assets, which he insisted go entirely to Sarah's community development projects. Richard, though initially skeptical, began to see genuine change in his brother. During one visit, David shared his plans for after his release not to return to high finance, but to work with rehabilitation programs for white-collar criminals, using his experience to prevent others from following his destructive path. Emily was right, David told them during a family meeting. "The true measure of a person isn't in what they take, but in what they give back. I wasted decades taking from others to feel powerful. Now I understand that real power lies in helping others rise." 5 years after discovering her true heritage, Sarah Thompson Anderson stood at the podium of the National Business Leadership Conference, accepting the Innovator of the Year award. The audience, comprising the country's top executives, listened intently as she shared the story of transforming Anderson Corporation from a traditional real estate empire into a model of socially responsible business. "Success isn't measured solely by profit margins," she declared, Emily's locket now permanently around her neck. "True success lies in lifting others as we climb. Our company's greatest achievement isn't our record earnings, it's the thousands of lives we've improved through our community investment programs." Under Sarah's leadership, Anderson Corporation had pioneered a new business model. The Emily Thompson Initiative, their flagship program, had transformed struggling neighborhoods across New England. The old factory where Sarah once worked now housed a thriving community center, offering job training, childcare, and small business support. Richard, seated in the front row with the triplets, now poised 12-year-olds, watched with pride as his daughter detailed their achievements. The girls had grown into remarkable young ladies, each contributing to the family legacy in their own way. Lucy had started a youth leadership program, Grace ran art therapy sessions at their community centers, and Hope had developed a mentor program for children of single parents. "We've proven that social responsibility and profitability aren't mutually exclusive," Sarah continued. "By investing in communities others had written off, we've not only generated sustainable returns but created a ripple effect of positive change." The numbers backed her words. Anderson Corporation's innovative approach had doubled their profits while creating thousands of jobs. their micro-lending program had helped hundreds of small businesses start and grow. Every project incorporated education and community development alongside business objectives. Victoria Ashworth, who had once tried to humiliate Sarah, now sat in the audience, having recently approached Anderson Corporation for partnership in community development projects. The social landscape had shifted. Sarah's approach was becoming the new standard for corporate success. The most meaningful validation came from Mrs. Rodriguez, who had expanded her corner store into a successful chain of community markets with Anderson Corporation's support. She now sat on their advisory board, bringing crucial perspective from the communities they served. After the ceremony, at a private celebration in Anderson Manor, Sarah shared news that brought tears to Richard's eyes. "We're establishing the Emily Thompson Business School," she announced. "It will provide full scholarships to promising students from underprivileged backgrounds with a focus on ethical leadership and community development." The school would be built on the site of the old library where Emily and Richard first met, completing a circle of healing and hope. The curriculum would include not just business skills but lessons in social responsibility and community engagement. Lucy, wearing the original locket for the occasion, added their own surprise. "We've started a student program too," she announced. "The Thompson Triplets mentorship program, helping other kids understand that where you come from doesn't determine where you can go." The success of Anderson Corporation under Sarah's leadership had changed more than just the business landscape. It had proven that compassion and commerce could coexist, that profit and purpose could align. Her story from factory worker to innovative CEO had become a case study in business schools across the country. On the 10th anniversary of the stormy night that brought the Thompson-Anderson family together, Anderson Manor hosted a celebration unlike any in its history. The grand halls that had once echoed with lonely footsteps now buzzed with life and laughter as both sides of Emily's legacy came together. The guest list bridged all social divides. Mrs. Rodriguez chatted with corporate executives, sharing her perspective on community business development. Former factory workers who had known Emily mingled with society figures who had once shunned her. The triplets, now accomplished young teenagers, moved effortlessly between all groups, embodying their grandmother's gift for connecting people. David, recently released from prison and working with rehabilitation programs, attended quietly, his presence a testament to the power of redemption. He spent much of the evening with Hope, who had taken a special interest in his prison outreach programs. But Richard stood at the main staircase, watching his family with misty eyes. Sarah approached, linking her arm through his. "Thinking about Mom?" she asked softly. "She should be here," Richard replied. "She would have loved seeing all of this, her communities coming together, her granddaughters thriving, even David finding his way back to humanity." The centerpiece of the celebration was the unveiling of a portrait Grace had painted of Emily to be hung in the main hall of the Emily Thompson Business School. The painting captured Emily's essence, her warmth, strength, and innate dignity radiating from the canvas. In it, she wore the locket that had brought her family back together. Lucy, wearing the actual locket, stood to address the gathered crowd. 10 years ago, 3 scared little girls knocked on a door in a storm. We didn't know then that we were knocking on the door of our own history, our own legacy. Grandmother Emily left us more than just this locket. She left us the understanding that true wealth lies in how we treat each other. Grace unveiled her painting to gasps of appreciation. Those who had known Emily wiped away tears at the perfect capture of her spirit. Our mother Sarah added, taught us Emily's most important lesson, that adversity can break you or make you stronger, depending on how you face it. Hope, the quietest triplet, surprised everyone by taking the microphone. "We've learned that family isn't just about blood or names," she said. "It's about the connections we choose to honor, the love we choose to give, and the legacy we choose to build." The celebration continued into the evening, with stories being shared, old wounds healing, and new connections forming. The Anderson Manor, once a symbol of privilege and isolation, had become a bridge between communities, just as Emily had always dreamed. As the night drew to a close, Richard found himself in his study with Sarah and the girls. The room that had once been his refuge from the world was now a warm family space, filled with photographs, artwork, and mementos of their journey together. "Mom would be proud," Sarah said, touching the locket around Lucy's neck. "Not just of what we've achieved, but of how we achieved it with compassion, integrity, and love." The legacy of Emily Thompson had come full circle. Her love story with Richard, though tragically interrupted, had produced ripples of positive change that would continue for generations. Through Sarah and the Triplets, her vision of bridging social divides and creating opportunity for all had become reality. In the end, it wasn't just about healing one family's wounds or righting past wrongs. It was about proving that love, compassion, and determination could overcome any obstacle. That true legacy lies not in wealth or status, but in the lives we touch and the changes we inspire. Thank you for joining us for The Locket's Legacy. If you were moved by Emily's story of love, sacrifice, and redemption, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your insights and reactions mean the world to us. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more touching family dramas and stories that warm the heart. Help us spread these messages of hope and love by sharing this video with your friends and family. If you enjoyed this story of healing and reconciliation, please show your support with a like. Every like helps us create more content that celebrates the triumph of love over adversity. Stay tuned for more stories that remind us of the power of family bonds and the strength of the human spirit.